The relative safety of the Berkshire cabin was a fragile illusion, a brief caesura between the movements of a gathering storm. Charlotte and Mia knew it. With every passing hour, the sense of urgency pressed down on them, an invisible pressure as tangible as the air they breathed. They were no longer running. They were preparing for an invasion. Alistair Thorne arrived the following afternoon, his old Volvo looking out of place against the rugged woodland backdrop. He wasn't alone. Eleanor Vance sat in the passenger seat. The presence of their only allies in this insane war brought a fleeting, fragile comfort. They didn't come inside. Thorne was strangely superstitious about entering their temporary sanctuary. Instead, they met outside in the cooling, late afternoon air. A strategy meeting illuminated by the last slanting rays of sun through the pines. Thorne opened the trunk of his car. Inside was an old wooden box, carved with symbols Charlotte didn't recognize. "Here," he said, his voice low and serious. "Everything I could procure on such short notice." He opened the box. It did not hold glittering, mystical objects. It held earth and ash. "Salt from the Dead Sea," he said, indicating a small linen pouch. "It carries the purity of a land devoid of life, a nullity spirits cannot abide. This is the ash of a lightning-struck rowan tree, fire from the heavens, a cleansing destruction." There were small vials of holy water, bundles of pungent-smelling dried herbs, and a small silver-bladed dagger, its hilt worn smooth by generations of use. "It won't kill anything," Eleanor explained, sensing Charlotte's alarm. "But pure silver disrupts psychic energy. Think of it as a circuit breaker. It might buy you a second or two when you need it most." "We're ready," Charlotte said, though the words felt like ash in her own mouth. At that exact moment, as if cued by some malevolent playwright, the burner phone in Charlotte's pocket rang. Only one person other than Thorne and Eleanor had this number. Her heart stopped. It was Julian. She glanced at Thorne, who gave a single, sharp nod. She answered, putting the call on speaker. This time there was no false cheer, no cold politeness. Julian's voice was a controlled snarl, stretched as taut as a wire about to snap. "Your time is up, Mrs. Ashworth," he hissed. "My patience has its limits. I know you are not alone. I have eyes everywhere, even on old fools who dabble in history." A direct threat aimed at Thorne. "This game of hide-and-seek ends now." "What do you want, Julian?" Charlotte asked, her voice harder than she'd expected. "What I have always wanted. The scorpion's heart," he said. "And now I will have it. This is the final offer. Bring it to me before sunrise. Leave it on the front steps of the house. Then disappear. Do that, and perhaps I will let you and your daughter live. And if we don't..." Charlotte could hear a vicious smile in his voice. "Then I will perform a different kind of ritual. One of fire and ash. I will burn that house to the ground, with your husband's pathetic trapped soul inside it. The destruction of a nexus point so violently will not just banish him, it will annihilate him as if he never existed. And then, when I am done, I will find your daughter. I will find you both. Sunrise, Mrs. Ashworth. That is your deadline." He hung up. The silence he left behind was absolute and heavy. Julian's threat wasn't just about physical death. He had threatened the utter annihilation of Ethan's soul. He had weaponized Charlotte's love for her husband against her, forcing her to choose between unleashing an ancient demon and completely erasing the existence of the man she once loved. But he had made a mistake. He thought he was giving her an impossible choice. Instead, he had given her a certainty. "We have to go now," Charlotte said, looking at Thorne and Eleanor. "We have to do the ritual tonight, before sunrise." Desperation had turned into a race against time. The journey back to Maple Creek was a descent into hell. Thorne drove, his old eyes focused on the road ahead. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, silent and watchful. Charlotte and Mia were in the back, the wooden box of ritual components sitting between them like an unexploded bomb. As they drove east, the landscape changed. The wild hills of the Berkshires gave way to the manicured suburbs of Connecticut. But the perfection now looked sinister, a mask hiding the rot underneath. No one spoke, but the tension in the car was nearly a physical thing. Charlotte felt a cold fury building in her chest. This was no longer just about survival. This was about vengeance. For Ethan, for the betrayal, for the destruction of their lives. Mia was different. She had her eyes closed, but she wasn't sleeping. She was doing as Eleanor had taught, trying to filter the psychic noise that grew louder and louder the closer they got to the house. "It's like a lighthouse," she whispered, so quietly only Charlotte could hear. "A black lighthouse. It's pulling everything toward it. I can feel Dad. He's like a moth, flying around that flame, getting burned." Thorne didn't take the main entrance. Instead, he turned onto a small, unmarked access road Charlotte never knew existed, plunging deep into the woods that backed their property. He pulled to a stop on an old, overgrown logging trail. "This is as far as I go," he said, turning to face them. "The energy near the house is too strong. This old heart can't take it." He handed Charlotte a small but powerful flashlight. "Eleanor has taught you what you need to know. Remember, your first and only objective, establish the sanctuary. Do not get distracted. Do not be provoked. Speed and silence are your allies." Charlotte and Mia stepped out of the car, the cold night air enveloping them. Eleanor handed Charlotte a canvas bag with the defensive items, salt, iron, chalk, and kept the heavier wooden box for herself. "We will wait here," Thorne said, "until dawn. If you're not back." He didn't need to finish the sentence. They nodded and turned, melting into the darkness of the woods. The woods behind their home had never felt so alien. This was no longer the forest where they had taken walks. It was enemy territory. The air was thick and cold, and an unnatural silence blanketed everything. No insect chirps, no frogs, just the sound of their own feet rustling in the dry leaves. As soon as they were deep among the trees, they began, the glowing eyes, watching them, spectral embers in the dark, and the whispers started, snaking through the branches like a poisonous wind. "She'll abandon you, just like your father did." A voice hissed in Mia's ear. "This is all your fault. Your greed killed him." Another whispered to Charlotte. "Don't listen," Eleanor murmured, her voice a calm, steady anchor. "They are echoes, psychic parrots. They repeat your own fears back to you. Ignore them." Mia gripped her mother's hand. She was using her shielding techniques, imagining a mirror around her mind, deflecting the venomous words. But it took a ferocious act of concentration. They moved methodically, with Mia in the lead. She was no longer just a scared teenager. She was their navigator in this nightmare world. "Not that way," she'd whisper, pointing to the left. "Something feels very cold there, very old. This way." Charlotte and Eleanor followed without question, putting their faith completely in her psychic compass. After 15 minutes that felt like a lifetime, they saw it through the trees. The house. It was dark, sitting like a great tomb on the hill. All the lights were out. Julian was inside, masking his presence. They crept to the edge of the back lawn, taking cover behind a low stone wall. Their target was a small basement window at the rear of the house. One Charlotte remembered had a faulty latch. It was the only weak point they could think of. They crawled across the damp grass, staying low. Every rustle sounded like a scream. As they neared the window, Eleanor held up a hand, stopping them. She drew the small silver dagger. She did nothing with it, just held it, its blade gleaming faintly in the moonlight. "Clears the air," she whispered. "Helps us go unnoticed." Charlotte used a small screwdriver from Eleanor's kit to work on the old latch. After a few tense seconds, it gave way with a soft but gunshot-loud click. They carefully slid the window open. A gust of damp, musty basement air washed over them. Eleanor went first, moving with surprising agility. Mia followed, then Charlotte. They landed on the cold concrete floor, then gently pulled the window closed behind them. They were in, but their relief lasted only a second. The basement was absolute black. It was cold, and it smelled of earth, damp concrete, and something else, a faint metallic tang of old fear. Charlotte clicked on Thorne's flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, revealing familiar shapes. Boxes of Christmas ornaments, Mia's old bicycle, forgotten furniture draped in white cloths like ghosts. But there were new things. In the center of the floor, painted in a dark reddish-brown that looked disturbingly like dried blood, were strange twisting sigils they'd never seen before. "Julian's wards," Eleanor whispered, shining her own flashlight on them. "Alarm wards. He'll know if anyone crosses them." "What do we do?" Charlotte asked. "We go around," Eleanor said. "Don't touch. Don't step over." They skirted the walls, giving the ominous circle of symbols a wide berth. As they reached the bottom of the stairs leading to the main floor, Eleanor stopped them. She was listening. The house above them was not completely silent. They could hear it now. A very faint, almost subliminal sound. Music. A simple, repeating piano melody, but it was distorted and out of tune, like a broken music box. It was both melodic and deeply unsettling. "He knows we're here," Mia whispered, clutching her mother's arm. "No," Eleanor said. "He doesn't. But the house does." They moved slowly up the stairs, each step creaking under their weight. When Charlotte opened the door at the top, the music was slightly louder. It seemed to be coming from the living room. They stepped into the main hall. The house was dark and cold, but it did not feel empty. It felt occupied, contaminated. Charlotte swept the flashlight beam into the living room. The furniture had been rearranged. The armchairs were now facing the fireplace, as if for an audience. And on her grand piano, something was moving. The keys of the piano were depressing on their own, playing that strange, off-key melody. No one was sitting there. As they stared, horrified, a little girl's giggle echoed from the other side of the room. Charlotte's beam shot across and caught it for a second. A little girl, in a summer dress, looking exactly like a younger Mia, stood in the dining room doorway. She smiled at them, but the smile didn't reach her eyes, which were black, empty sockets. "Traps," Eleanor whispered. "Psychic traps. Don't engage." They turned their backs on the living room and started for the main staircase leading to the second floor, where their target guest bedroom was. They had to move fast, but as they set foot on the first step, a figure materialized at the top of the stairs, blocking their path. It was Ethan. This time, he was almost solid. He wore the suit he'd died in, but it was torn and smeared with dirt. His face was a mask of anguish, and his eyes, they glowed with that cold, soulless blue light. He said nothing. He just stood there, a tragic sentinel, the jailer of his own home. "Ethan," Charlotte gasped, her heart breaking. The spirit did not react to the name. It simply blocked their way, an impassable obstacle. They were trapped. Behind them, the parlor ghosts. In front of them, the house's corrupted guardian. "We can't fight him," Mia said, tears welling in her eyes. "We don't have to," Eleanor said, her voice urgent. "Remember, Mia, his emotions are twisted, but they're there. The love, the regret. Julian uses them as a leash, but we can use them as a key. Mia looked up at the form of her father, and a hard resolve settled on her face. She stepped forward, out from behind her mother's protection. "Dad," she said, her voice ringing in the silence. She wasn't talking to the spirit. She was talking to her father. "Dad, I know you're in there. I know you're in pain. Julian is doing this to you. He's turning your love into a prison, but we're here. We're not leaving again. We're here to help you. We're here to set you free." The spirit of Ethan didn't answer, but there was a shift. The blue light in its eyes flickered, and for a split second, just a single instant, Charlotte saw her husband's eyes again, warm, full of agony and love. The figure recoiled a step, a gesture of indecision. It brought a phantom hand to its head, as if in pain. It didn't vanish, but it drifted back, away from the center of the staircase. It had given them an opening. "Go, now," Eleanor commanded. They didn't need to be told twice. They surged up the stairs, past the tormented spirit of Ethan, who seemed to be fighting a terrible internal war. They raced down the hall, to the guest bedroom at the end. They burst inside, and Charlotte slammed the door. She fumbled with the old-fashioned deadbolt, a useless gesture against such an enemy. "Start," Eleanor yelled. "Seal the room." Charlotte dumped a thick line of the salt and iron mixture across the threshold. Mia, her hands trembling, took out a piece of chalk and began to frantically draw a complex spiral sigil on the floor just inside the door. But they weren't fast enough. As Mia was drawing the final line, the brass doorknob began to slowly, chillingly turn. There was a soft click as the lock was disengaged from the other side. The door began to creak open. From the hallway outside, in the darkness, they could hear it. A low, sorrowful moan, the sound of a tortured soul, torn between love and domination, was right outside. Mia's father, Charlotte's husband, their jailer, was coming.